communities and affect people, how it affects the sustainability of communities and how they can survive and how they can thrive, which ultimately is what communities should be allowed to do in a reasonable environment. So I suppose, with a bit of that, context and perspective, seeing Esther is on the call. Not seeing if Alex or Shane are on, but I would ask all the filmmakers who happen to be on the call this particular question. So the Natural Resource Governance Institute defines the resource curse as the following: the significant social, economic, and political challenges that are unique to countries rich in oil, gas, and minerals. The resource curse is also known as the paradox of plenty. So my opening question to each of the panelists who are on is basically, do you believe that the resource curse is real? And if so, why? And if not, why not? And I think we can kick off the discussion from there. Hi, Esther, how are you doing?
Hi, Carver, great to be here. Thanks for having me. Hi, Ramola.
Nice to finally meet you, not in person, not in person.
Sorry, just saying hi to Esther. I'm staying off camera for now.
Yeah,
okay.
I was asked to have a background, but I don't know how to put it on. So if anyone wants to tell me how to do that, that would be great. Otherwise, here I am.
Yeah.
The issue about the resource curse is problematic in two ways. One, it defines all of living creation as a resource. So it starts with the assumption that things like water, air, soil, plants, trees, human beings, other animals, etc., are resources to be exploited in some way or the other. So we're already starting from a kind of notion that the primary purpose of the natural world is to be exploited within some kind of capitalist system, rather than that we're all part of it. We all need to take care of each other, and we all have equal value and worth. So that's one issue. The other issue is if we agree that the historical colonial fact of extractivism and extraction, right, which is that our whole purpose as subjected and colonized peoples, whether we are actual colonies or whether we're post-colonial or neo-colonial or whatever, or whether we're just poor people living in rich countries, our whole purpose is to be extracted. So the curse isn't something that comes from God, right? Or the ancestors, right? Curse is the fact that we're in political economy that is unequal, both globally and locally. And so if you have what the world wants, whether that's aluminum, bauxite, alumina, gold, lithium, water, labor, trees, you name it, then others want that, which has been the history that we've experienced and the history that we continue to experience, where indigenous peoples and others are constantly being murdered and pushed off their land because what is wanted is within that land or that water. So again, I reject the notion that the natural world is a resource, and I also reject the notion that it's a curse, because it's within a global economy that is unequal and colonial.
Yeah. Well, speaking on the question of the inequality of certainly there's a quite a bit of inequality within the concept of the application of the idea of the resource curse. And what I mean by that is, I mean, generally countries that, in my understanding, that tend to be resource cursed, tend to be countries of Black and brown people, you know?
Well, I mean, Norway, you could say Norway is
They're the exception.
no. What I mean is, so what you're saying is that actually, if you look at places that have resources that are not considered cursed, right? They're all rich countries, right? Canada, the US, Norway. I mean, Canada is the most extractive country in the world, both internally, and Canadian corporations are the worst actors throughout the world. But no one really talks about Canada being having a resource curse, right?
Exactly.
But if you talk to First Nation people in Canada, or if you talk to the Quebecois, you will, of course, they're resource cursed, right?
Slightly different perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Shane, are you on the call? I'm not able to see if you are or not. Is Shane on the call, folks?
Hi, Carver. It's actually just you and Esther.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we've been messaging you, but you haven't gotten them. It's fine.
Been messaging me. Okay.
Yeah, no worries.
On my phone, I guess, which I'm not supposed to have right now.
On Zoom.
On Zoom.
Yeah, in the chat.
No, I've been seeing. I saw that Alex wasn't on. So
right. So yeah, Shane didn't join us. Alex was on, but then he dropped. So
okay. All right, no problem.
Okay.
Esther and I will have a nice intimate chat. Sorry, what was that, Esther?
I said maybe he'll come back on. You never know. Otherwise, we'll have to represent Guyana.
No problem. And if he does, you do a reasonably bad Guyanese accent. if I tried really hard. But we'll leave that for emergency situation. All right, so I had some questions for Alex about Coastland, and of course about Carbon Bomb. For Shane,
both great films.
Very, very good films. I felt that you had an opportunity to look at both of them, Esther?
Yes, I actually just I screened them in the public part of Global Extraction Film Festival 2 weeks ago. So I had selected them for the Guyana focus.
Excellent.
In fact, all of Alex and his sister's films are excellent. Yeah, I selected a number of them.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'd like to, anyway, we could talk about programming festivals offline, but let's talk a little bit more about Fly Me to the Moon, Esther. Just to sort of bring us up to the time, what is the current situation with the bauxite mining in the cockpit country? I know in the film, we got to the point where I believe it's the current government with Andrew Holness at the helm, who basically had stopped some extractive activity in the cockpit country. So if you could just give us a quick update.
Sure, they hadn't stopped anything. What had happened was they made a declaration. So what happened is in 2007, the communities, cockpit country is a large area in Jamaica for those that aren't aware, and it's a very important area, both ecologically, culturally, historically, and it provides, very important to food security because it provides a lot of agricultural products that are important to the Jamaican diet, such as yam, for example. So what happened was, what people need to understand is about 25% of Jamaica is bauxite, has bauxite in it. The soil has bauxite in it. And 5 parishes have been extracted by the aluminum industry beginning in the late 40s and the early 50s. And so what's been happening is that bauxite, what's called good quality bauxite, has been running out because it's been extracted for 70 years. Move into Trelawney for the first time, where some of the last large reserves of good quality bauxite exist. So the community, various communities in the cockpit country, of which there are very many different ones, um, came to realize that there had been prospecting licenses that had been granted by the government for
Mhm.
all, pretty much all of cockpit country.
Mhm.
And so people organized and fought against it. And from that time, which was then a different government, there was a declaration that would be no mining in cockpit country.
Mhm.
And then happened this political semantic game as to, well, where is cockpit country, right? You can
Right. Where the
declaration,
border
can
is.
you imagine, right? There's no
Mhm.
mining in all of, wherever, right?
Mhm.
But then how you define what that is. So then
Mhm.
followed um, over a decade, really,
Mhm.
of this game as to where is cockpit country. So finally, there were studies, there were different recommendations, there were different boundaries. And so finally, what is in my film is a declaration by our now Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, of a boundary, and that within that boundary, there'll be no mining. Okay.
Right.
So
I
what
see.
happens
Mhm.
is that actually there are leases for mining in cockpit country. And mining is happening right now in cockpit country, in
Mhm.
the St. Anne part of cockpit country, with moving west into Trelawney.
Mhm.
But there's no mining in the area designated as the cockpit
As cockpit country.
country,
Right. No
protected
mining
area.
area.
Right.
Right.
And that has
Right.
been declared, but it's never actually been made law either. It's not on the books. It's just a declaration so far.
Okay. Okay. Do you have a sense that it's that declared or not that it's being followed? Is it a loose law? Is it, or is it just paper that
Well,
the old political game?
well, it has to do with the huge efforts that have been made for over 20 years, going on 30 years, to not have mining in cockpit country. So it's a political risk, but they are pushing forward. But the thing to know about what's happening in Jamaica right now is that we export bauxite, which is the raw soil that's dug up, but we also export alumina, which is the next process before you smelt aluminum. And our main refinery had a fire. I don't know how that happened, a huge fire. And
Mhm.
it's now not functioning. So we only have one functioning refinery. The closing
Right.
of Jamalco, which is that refinery, which is in the film where we talk about the public health consequences of alumina refining, that is
Mhm.
closed consequently. That and the coup in Guinea have sent the prices of aluminum soaring worldwide.
Hmm.
They were already rising because of the whole COVID pandemic,
Right.
and now they're soaring because of the closing.
Mhm.
We've also been having fish kills caused by Windalco, which is an entity that used to be owned by Alcan and was bought out by Rusal, which is a Russian company owned by a Russian oligarch. They have been polluting the rivers and the groundwater even before it was Rusal, when it was Alcan,
Mhm.
for decades. And recently, there have been a number of fish kills, which is the river, Rio Cobra, that the people depend upon. They've been contaminating the river, and our agency, NEPA, the National Environmental Planning Agency, um, has said that they will not withdraw the permit that the company has for mining and refining.
Okay.
And instead they're to pay some kind of fees. And as was said by Patrice Charles in the film, the fees are minimal. They're set at 100,000 Jamaican dollars, which is, our money devalues constantly. I don't even know what it is now, but it's, you know, it's not even 1,000 US is the fee.
Mhm.
It's less than that. So a rich multinational corporation, they're not threatened by by minuscule fees and government that is assisting them in every way possible.
I hear you. Yeah, while I'm looking at the film, sort of got the impression that there was a great amount of community support across Jamaica, across geographic and socioeconomic sort of boundaries or whatever you want to call it. And I also felt through looking at the film, not through my own personal understanding, that the government felt as though that they would take that seriously if enough people, you know, sort of put their foot down and said, no, we don't want this. But it seems that it sounds like that is also a bit of a political game as well. To you know, it sounds like it's all politics ultimately, unfortunately.
You know, since when have our governments really cared about what the people think or want, right?
Yeah,
They're fairly autocratic, right? I mean, the law that we have that governs minerals is from 1945. It's a colonial law, right? And it vests the ownership of minerals in the government, right? So what we need to understand, and this is why I push back when everyone talks about outsiders coming in and taking our resources. It's the government, okay? In Jamaica, the government is majority owner of most of the bauxite and alumina entities. So Naranda.
So they have a vested interest. They have a vested interest in in business as usual and the status quo.
Naranda that they have given permits to mine in cockpit country, and is also you know, they have to go through a completely fraudulent environmental impact assessment process, right, with public consultation and all this nonsense, to the same government that is majority owner, right? Of the company that's going to do the mining. So the government is dependent, right? Even though we no longer have the bauxite levy, we no longer charge for the bauxite levy, we don't charge income tax, we don't, you know, all we get are royalties, right? The government is still incredibly dependent on on these resources, this money coming in. And that's why they have no incentive to stop, even though people across the country, especially those who are most impacted, would like it to stop.
Okay. So I know that we don't have that much time left. We have 5 minutes left, I believe. So if there are any questions from the audience, please go ahead and put them into the chat. And while we're waiting for questions from the audience, Esther, I have one last question from me. I noticed that you're the director, producer, editor,
everything.
chief cook, bottle washer, caterer, well-wisher, taxi driver, everything, right? So I was wondering, you know, given that you were sort of wearing all of those hats for this production, like, and it looks like it was a really sort of well thought out, articulate, detailed argument. So I'm guessing would have taken a while, given all of those realities. What was it like? How long did it take?
Well, this is just part of my activism. I've been involved in documenting, organizing, and fighting against extraction in Jamaica for a very long time. So the first film I made actually for the cause was in 2007, when everybody organized and made a film called Cockpit Country Voices from Jamaica's Heart. And that was aired on television, and within days the minister said there would be no mining in Cockpit.
Right.
So this has just been ongoing documentation and ongoing work. So it's been going on for almost 20 years. So this film represents at least 20 years of work, but it really goes back to my childhood, because I would have grown up with, you know, with the industry and you know, all of that.
Right. So it was like pulling from different aspects of your documentation of the work.
The whole 70s thing, I grew up with, you know, the whole attempt at a left. Two of my brothers were leaders in the very far left part of, you know, You know, the whole struggle over it was basically a civil war in Jamaica in the 70s. So all of that, you know, informed my knowledge of and wanting to put the pieces together. It's a complex story. It's not, I don't tell a simple story, and it's not just about Jamaica, and it's not just about one aspect. I link together, you know, these strands that people don't usually think about when they think of, you know, something like
Of
bauxite
course.
mining in Jamaica.
Of course, of course. No, it's an excellent film. Um, okay, I'm wondering if there are any questions from the audience. Not seeing any coming through in the chat. Okay, so maybe, I mean, I wanted to ask everybody a couple questions, right? And I suppose I was going to start with one of these questions, but maybe I'll end just quickly asking you, Esther. You know, I've gotten some of your reasons for being a filmmaker, documenter, storyteller in this space, but I mean, I would imagine that it's not easy. I would imagine that it takes a lot of energy, time, resources. I'd like to understand, like, what are your major challenges as a filmmaker, as a academic, doing work like this in the space that you're coming from?
Well, I've been doing it for over 35 years. And in the beginning, when I started, I was, it was always related to activism. But in the early days, it was mainly producing and writing. And so, you know, hiring other people to shoot and to edit and all of that. And then it became very clear that you'd never make money that way, one. And also, you know, you'd tell the cameraman what to do, and being a female, he would ignore you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
Right.
at some point just decided, you know, cameras got lighter. I mean, I grew up in the day of when cameras, you know, weighed 40, 50 pounds or whatever. You know, cameras became lighter, more mobile. It just taught myself how to do it. And somebody who understood as a writer and a reader from a very early age, just somebody who understands communication and kind of narrative. Editing was just very easy for me. I loved editing, and I taught myself to shoot. And then eventually it was just like, I can do this.
Efficient one-woman crew.
And that includes not needing any funding. You know, I can't be bothered with grants or any of that, because I'm not doing it to make money or to, you know, have a career. I've already had a career.
Right.
So,
Right. I hear you.
I'm doing it just part of my activism, and I do what I want to do, and what I don't want to do, I don't do. And of course, as you
Gotcha.
know, a film, a documentary, especially one that's complex and is covering over time, there was lots of things I would have liked to have been included that never worked out. You know, people who agreed to be interviewed who then weren't interviewed, or people who died, or you know, places I couldn't afford to go, et cetera, right? That's why I use a lot of archival footage. I couldn't afford to go to India. I could, you know, that couldn't afford to go to Australia, those sorts of things, right? So you make do, and that affects how you make it, and all of that.
Right. Well, I mean, despite any challenges, it's a beautiful, well-made piece. Thank you very much for making it. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I see someone asking does the filmmaker have a website?
No, I don't.
No website. And also asking, what about any upcoming projects that you have?
Well, I've been the thing that I've been involved with is with human rights lawyer Malene Aline. We put into the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights for the first ever regional thematic hearing on extraction. So that's extraction across the region of the Caribbean region, including the continental Caribbean and the island
Archipelago.
Archipelago part of the Caribbean, and
Mhm.
it was refused the first hearing, but it has been accepted. So October 26th will be the first time that the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights will pay attention to the human rights impacts of extraction in the Caribbean. So that's pretty major, and that's been a lot of work.
Nice.
And I'll be screening an
Congrats.
excerpt from Fly Me to the Moon, a 5-minute excerpt that I edited during that hearing. So
Excellent.
there's
Excellent.
Alex.
Yeah, Alex on the tail end here.
Apologies, everybody. I was 7/8 through the program, and then I got a power outage, and I had to scramble to get another computer. I'm very sorry
Lord.
about that.
Oh Lord. Sorry about that, but good to meet you, Alex. Good to see you. Ramola, I know that we are out of time.
Yeah,
Yes.
but let's he came back, so let's let's get a question to him at least.
Okay. Okay, Alex. So I have some specially prepared questions for you. I'll see. We did sort of explore quite a bit with Esther, but let me see if I can give you a bit of a question. Could be sort of give you an opportunity to stretch your legs a little bit. So Coastland, very well made film. Alex, thank you very much for making it. In the context of what you cover, Guyana is in a very interesting position, so, right? So on the one hand, you now have all of these, I guess, resources, you have all this oil and all this gas. On the other hand, you're super susceptible to sea level rise, saltwater intrusion, and the effects of climate change. So I'm wondering if through your work, you might have an idea of if there's any attempt to rationalize public education to understand sort of where Guyana is now and perhaps position a direction for Guyana given those challenges, right? In terms of adaptation and in terms of resilience, okay? And then how much research and hard data is out there to say, okay, well, this is what's happening and this is what we should do.
Right. That's a great question. So, the reality is that, like I mentioned in the film, and like everyone knows, the majority of Guyanese live on the coast, which is the most susceptible area. And with all the development going on, what we've seen so far is all of that centralized right in that vulnerable area. From what I can tell, there's really been no attempt to encourage people to move away from the capital. Mm-hmm. All the investment continues to pour into this location, and right now it's where everything is going up. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of, when I made this, I didn't really make it with the intention of saying, look, we need to get out of the coast right now, or anything like that. Mm-hmm. Because the reality is, the coast is our home. I myself, who's witnessed a lot of this firsthand, if I'm being very honest with myself, it would be very hard for me to pick up and leave and go to higher ground. Mm-hmm. Just mm-hmm. because everything is here, my family is here, like business opportunities are here. We don't have anywhere in Guyana right now to go to mm-hmm. and sort of, live the life of prosperity that we're hoping for.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
So, my intention was really to get people just aware of what's going on and perhaps catalyze conversation. Because I think mm-hmm. that, one documentary isn't going to change people's perspectives, but it could just sort of inform them. It's a way of looking at this subject that maybe isn't, I hope it wasn't too boring. And, it just sort of get a conversation going, especially among the young people. And I will say that I do some work in the education sector, and I know a few teachers and my past teachers who are actually very enthusiastic about the topic, with not because of me, just on their own accord, who are interested in climate change and how that's going to affect us as a low-lying coastal area. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think it has to come from the younger generation to sort of push for those those policies and safeguards to protect the future of Guyanese, and this is just a start. So
absolutely,
I'm glad I have the opportunity to show it on this panel and talk further.
Thank you very much for that. When I was in Guyana, I think the first year that I came for the Timiri Film Festival, somebody we showed a film, and somebody asked, this might have been in 2016 or 17, and the oil and the gas, it was still somewhat on the horizon. And the question was, I mean, I don't work in oil and gas, but they asked me, what can Guyana do to sort of insulate itself from some of the problems, or what can Guyana learn from, Trinidad and Tobago from a technical perspective, what not to do, with this new found energy, hoard of energy, and, hopefully resources and money. I can't remember what I said, but I think part of what I would have tried to get across was, for the Guyanese people to be responsible. At the end of the day, be responsible, because we in Trinidad and Tobago, it's arguable that we have not really been responsible, with that windfall, and I say that to sort of segue into the question of your film very clearly identifying and underscoring the existential, challenge of the climate crisis. I mean, Georgetown is under threat. There's no question, right? Georgetown is under threat. So, I suppose several years later, given the opportunity to speak in a different forum to a Guyanese audience, I would say, yeah, you need to figure out how you're gonna adapt, because it's coming, and if you have resources, and you clearly will have some more resources perhaps than before, you need to ensure that your capital is around, or maybe you figure out another way, but you need to figure it out, that's what I would say, because it's coming. We don't see it as starkly as you see it. All right. It's very slow, Trinidad. Coastal erosion is slow for the most part, and the everyday person doesn't see it. They don't drive by and say, oh yeah, it's not as evident. And that is another type of problem. But yeah, I think that climate change adaptation resilience needs to be sort of baked into the economic development plan, diversification, and it needs to be done urgently, right? This is me from 3 years ago shouting into the future to now saying this is what you need to do, right? So anyway, yeah. So those are my thoughts. I don't know if we have more time with Alex.
We don't. But Birchmore has been patient, so he has a question in there.
Okay, shall I read his question? Birchmore said, based on what Alex just said, has there been any change in people's attitudes towards climate change and the vulnerability of Guyana for natural disasters, especially from the sea, especially after the airings of coastland? Alex?
Well, it's a great question, and I would hope so, but very hard to measure. I think I guess the only way I could speak to that is based on the opportunities I've been given since releasing the film, coming on forums like this. I've given a talk to 360.org, which is a regional group focusing on issues like climate change and stuff like that. After Coastland was aired, I was invited to speak to the high school, the Form 1 and 2 class of Queens College, which was an amazing opportunity for me. So, I think like little things like that really help, and essentially is what the results I would love to see based on the work I do. It's hard to gauge, like I said, because we don't really do well with keeping statistics here, not necessarily with my documentary or looking at that, but just for example, with sea level rise and, how much has the sea come in? Like, is that public knowledge and is that information accessible and stuff like that? So again, hard to gauge, but just based on the responses, I like to think that that the film has sort of had an impact on the younger generation who spend a bit more time, I guess, online on the online forums and you know have sort of consume content by well, I'm not super young anymore, but like younger people like myself as well. So yeah, I would like to think so. And again, like it's September 2021. Like we're almost 2 years from the film coming out, and you know it's still great to have the opportunity to talk about it. So, and then one thing I've said with film, I guess, is that when you make these things, you know, I think the real impact of it doesn't happen until well down the line. You know, always doesn't happen right away. So maybe we're still going, and I'm very grateful for that.
Absolutely. Behavior change is very, very slow, and people tend to forget that, especially behavior change as it relates to media and communication. Messages have to be repeated over and over and over to be effective.
All right.
Ramola?
Yes, yes. We do have to wrap things up now. So I just want to say thank you, Carver, for working, managing, speaking with our filmmakers today. Thanks to Alex and Esther for being here. And you know, we appreciate you all sharing your films with us and engaging in conversation with us. And we look forward to seeing what we're gonna do next year, because you never know until the time comes. What's there?
What's next? Thanks a lot, guys. Really enjoyed it. Chatting with Alex and Esther, as usual. Ramola, thank you very much.
All right.